Yo, what's up, sleepers? It's your boy, Ed Bedhead, and today we will be covering one of the most legendary bands of all time. For this review, I will be covering the next 6 Rolling Stones albums. So if you haven't checked out the last video, make sure to give it a watch. I will not be covering any deluxe versions of these albums or remixes of any of these songs. I will, however, be covering some of the remastered versions since that's what was available on Spotify. Now that we got the rules out of the way, let's rock! By the way, if you're wondering what all that snoring noise is, it's Kingsley the Pug. I'll show you guys at the end of the video. On April 15th of 1966, the Rolling Stones found their true identity. They put out a legendary album. The album's name was Aftermath. Aftermath was entirely composed by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. All the songs were original. The blues rock covers were no more. However, the genre can still be defined as blues rock. It's also got a bit of pop rock in it as well. It even rivaled the Beatles' Rubber Soul album in UK charts. And if you haven't checked out my reviews on the Beatles, make sure to give it a watch. Anyway, I recommend this album because of its significance in history. It helped fuel the counterculture movement of the 1960s. The album even began to give each individual band member their own financial success. The Rolling Stones truly achieved greatness both financially and numerically on charts. In fact, one of their most popular songs is on this album. It is my pick for my favorite song on this album. It's called Paint It Black. And if you haven't heard this ultra mega popular song, I highly recommend you listen to it if you're not going to listen to any other Rolling Stones song. The 7th American Rolling Stones album to be released was released on January 20th of 1967. The album was entitled Between the Buttons. This was an interesting album, to say the least. That's because the band began to experiment with psychedelic rock, and they weren't really known to do that, so it was very new for all the fans listening. Therefore, I recommend this album if you want to listen to a different style from the Rolling Stones. Some consider it an underrated masterpiece, so if that doesn't hype you up to listen to it, I don't know what will. And I myself tend to agree with those people. I think it's a great album, and it definitely deserves a lot more attention than it gets. My favorite song on this album is Let's Spend the Night Together. It's the kind that makes you feel excited and even hyped up for a date. Definitely check this song out if you want that kind of a vibe. Okay, so the 8th American released Rolling Stones album debuted on December 8th of 1967, and it's a bit controversial. In fact, some say that it was even made to rival Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album by the Rolling Stones. I mean, just look at the album covers. The Rolling Stones album was named Their Satanic Majesty's Request, and the genre for this album can be defined as psychedelic rock. They continue to experiment with that sound and add a lot more to it. But things weren't all fun and games during the recording of this album. In fact, band members would be plagued by drug use, court appearances, and even jail. It was definitely a rough time for the band. After this album, they would abandon psychedelic rock completely and go back to blues rock. It's a bit hard to recommend this album because opinions vary so drastically. Many fans, even some of the band members themselves, dislike this album. It originally reached number 2 in the US charts, but it was quickly criticized and disowned by the band themselves. Today, some fans look back on it with an unbiased perspective, and I do agree there are some good things here, but I don't know if that would justify recommending this album. I will, however, say my favorite song on this album is Citadel, which I do find myself revisiting constantly. They pulled off the psychedelic rock sound on this song, and so it turned out really well. If you're not gonna listen to this album, at least listen to that song, I suppose. The 9th Rolling Stones album to be released in the United States was released on December 6th of 1968. It was called Beggars Banquet. The genre can be defined as electric blues. They went back to work on expanding what they were great at, and thus released this great album. And it resulted in the beginning of their best period. However, there was tragedy on the buildup of this album. Brian Jones, who founded the band and came up with the name The Rolling Stones, had taken a turn for the worse. His addiction to drugs and alcohol had made it harder to work with him. In fact, by this point, Brian had basically been sidelined because he was just so unreliable. Could hardly get through a recording session. And unfortunately, this was the last album released during his lifetime, as he would later drown in his own pool at the young age of 27. He did, however, work on 2 songs for the next album, but he would not see those songs completed during his lifetime. Thus, I recommend this album because although he played a minor role in it, I think it's important to acknowledge his work up to this point, and more importantly, the legacy he had created by forming this band. My favorite song on this album is Sympathy for the Devil. It's such a well-known song. In fact, I think it even rivals Painted Black. It's used in so much media and film today. And here's an embarrassing fact for you. I remember playing this song on Just Dance a lot. And it's a really good song, but the reason it's embarrassing is not because playing Just Dance is cringy. I enjoy playing Just Dance and others should too, but I will, however, say I'm a bad dancer, and that's what makes it so cringy. So I definitely recommend listening to that song. If you're enjoying this video so far, make sure to smash that like button, comment down below on what your favorite Rolling Stones song is, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. It really helps me out. So the 10th American Rolling Stones album to be released was debuted on December 5th of 1969. The album was named Let It Bleed. The band would use many different types of blues styles on this album. So for simplicity's sake, I'm just gonna call the genre blues mix. The album was very well received in the UK and the US. Therefore, I recommend it to anyone who wants to experience a variety of blues styles in an album. My favorite song on this album is Gimme Shelter. Up to this point, I think it's the greatest blues rock song they had released yet. Give it a listen and you might end up liking the blues rock if you don't already. The 11th Rolling Stones album to be released in the United States was released on April 23rd of 1971. The album was named Sticky Fingers, and it was an exciting time for the Rolling Stones. They had finally released an album on their very own label. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards' partnership had strengthened so much. Their work was divided more evenly, making it easier for everyone. Not to mention that Andy Warhol came up with the album cover. Sticky Fingers is some of the Rolling Stones' best work. The album was so good that for the first time, it reached '1 on both the US and UK charts. Therefore, I recommend it to anyone who wants to experience some of the best work the Rolling Stones have to offer. My favorite song on this album is Brown Sugar. It's a really cool rock that I can play while driving on the highway on a summer day, or even down the street with the windows down. So that's all I have for you guys today. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to smash that like button, comment down below on what your favorite Rolling Stone song is, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. It'll really help me out. Also, if you guys want to see what that snoring sound is, it's that boy Kingsley sleeping next to me the whole time. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. Peace!